Oh, yeah.
Welcome to, see if I'm on. Welcome to Rotary today on this chilly November day. I put on my Mr. Rogers sweater. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I think it's a Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rayhan is going to introduce our guests.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? All right. Stan says it's a chilly day. Okay. We have two guests is here. One is good friend Lee Morris as a guest. Michelle. Michael Brighton. Am I right? Okay. Hi, Michael. And we have returning guest. Okay, she's coming back. Sharon comes. Okay. Let's give a big round of applause for our guest. All right. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Mark to come up because we're going to go over the slate of officers for next year.
Thank you, President-elect Stanton. I love that name. I have two friends that are named Stanton. Every year at this time, a group of current officers and past presidents get together and work hard to help ensure the future of our club. We've gotten together a little earlier, I think, this year than we might have in the past, and this group has worked hard to present you the following slate. When I read your name, if you're here, please stand and remain standing, and if you're not here but hear your name, please stand in your office at home or wherever you are. On the slate for next year's officers, Stan Martindale, President; Marie Pico, President-elect; Steve Knoll, Vice President; Deborah Ricks, Treasurer; Carol Jordan, Secretary; Russ Cobb, Sergeant-at-Arms. Board members at large: Cody Fredrickson, Colleen Jameson, and Allison Marker. And the Topeka Rotary Foundation is Tom Payne for a first term, Trey George for a second term, and Lon Lewis for a second term. With that, are there any nominations from the floor?
I make a motion to cease nominations and to accept the slate as presented.
I'll take a second. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. These are your officers. We will vote on a paper ballot next week for them. And again, please give the nominating committee, a group of past presidents and some of your current officers, a round of applause for working hard to get the right people in the right seat on the desk.
And of course, Mark, as our immediate past president, was chairing that committee, and it also consisted of the president and president-elect, and then 2 out of the last 5 presidents are members of that committee. A few announcements before we get to our speaker. The November featured charity is the Thanksgiving turkey giveaway at the Islamic Center, and ask you to add some money to the cup money and cups and give generously. I think I'll save the rest of the announcements until the end of the meeting, and I'm going to ask Sherda to come up and introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce someone that I got to know this year as Brownview Board National Historic Site, and the community partners were celebrating the 65th anniversary of the case. and that is Miss Kenya Cox. Kenya is the executive director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, so she works for the governor of our state. She's been in that position for 3 years. She's also president of the Kansas Conference of the NAACP. And what she is going to be talking about today is a job where she was selected as one of 14 people to be a member of a federal commission, the 400 Years of African American History Commission, which was created by Congress. And specifically, that commission was to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the August 1619 arrival of Africans for the first time on North American soil, and then to honor the 400 years of contributions for African Americans in our society. It was a real pleasure getting to know Kenya. She did an incredible job of producing and hosting a banquet for the plaintiffs' families at the state capitol, which I think was a really moving experience for people that had been involved in the case, and was a very gracious way of honoring their contributions to Topeka history. So I'm very honored to present Mrs. Kenya Cox. Make sure I get it working this way. There we go.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to the leadership and members of this esteemed organization for inviting me here today. As was stated earlier, my name is Kenya Cox, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, Office of the Kansas Governor. And although the topic which I'm going to share with you today is not directly related to my position, it is, however, is not directly connected to my position. It is, however, directly related to it. Because you see, you can't tell the story of America without telling the story of Africans in America. And our very own Kansas history has played and continues to play a pivotal role in that story. I was just kind of going through and sharing some of the highlights and events and some of the things that we have been doing since we all got appointed to this federal commission. The commission's purpose is to plan, develop, and carry out programs and activities throughout the United States that recognize and highlights the resiliency, the cultural contributions of Africans and African Americans over 400 years, to acknowledge the impact that slavery and laws that enforced racial discrimination had on the United States, to educate the public about the arrival of Africans in the United States, to plan, to develop, and carry out programs and activities throughout the United States appropriate for the commemoration of the 400th anniversary of the arrival of Africans in the English colonies at Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619. We also help to assist states and localities and nonprofit organizations to further the commemoration and coordinate public scholarly research about the arrival of Africans and their contributions to the United States. And lastly, to encourage civic, patriotic, historical, educational, artistic, religious, economic, and other organizations throughout the United States to organize and to participate in anniversary activities to expand the understanding and the appreciation of the history. And there you have a photo of our governor when she actually issued a proclamation commemorating the anniversary. So now here's a little history about the law. So on February the 11th in 2016, Senator Tim Kaine was joined by others from the NAACP, Senator Mark Warren, Representative Bobby Scott, Representative Don Byers, and the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus at the time, Representative G.K. Butterfield, to introduce the 400 Years of African American History Act that later was signed into law by President Donald Trump on January the 8th, 2018, pursuant to Law 115-102, with the directives about all the different things that we are instructed to do. Right after we got appointed and we had our first meeting, which was in November, we had the federal shutdown. So that stopped us too. Let's see, just a little couple of things about the charge that I shared with you. That's our new chairman, who was one of the individuals that was at the National Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. He was over the archives there, Mr. Rex Ellis, Dr. Rex Ellis. So our first meeting in D.C. was in February of this year. And during that meeting, we conducted our official business, but while we're doing that, we also try to make it a point to learn and further our knowledge about African American history. And on this trip, we attended a reception that was held at the Museum of the Bible. We had a chance to see the Slave Bible exhibit and view an actual copy of the Slave Bible. And an interesting fact, there's 1,189 chapters in the Bible, but there's only 232 chapters in the Slave Bible. And it was really, really interesting. And I also got a chance to see President Eisenhower's Bible on display while I was there. I always try to get in our Kansas history. Also during that time, we toured the National Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture. And we met with our congressional delegations and talked a little bit about what they visualize for us to be able to do, because that's a big charge. We have 50 states, there's 15 commissioners, and we're talking about a lot of history. And most of what we tried to focus on is a lot of the lesser known histories in our nation. So our next trip to DC was in June, and that was actually June of 2019. That was actually 10 years after the House and the Senate's concurrent resolution acknowledging the plight of African Americans since 1619, and called upon all people of the United States to work towards eliminating racial prejudice, injustices, discrimination from our society. Senator Mark Warren, our congressional host for this event, and our commission together, we convened a Let's Talk About Our Dream, a 400-year journey of trials and triumphs and trailblazing. We had close to 450 attendees and presenters gathered for the official legislative launch of Public Law 115-112 at the United States Capitol Visitor Center in the Congressional Auditorium, among whom there was lots of legislators, students, educators, some historic just icons, federal representatives, and a diverse intergenerational public. That's a group shot of us after the event. The students were really wonderful, and I had the opportunity to host the students from the Thorogood Marshall Middle School. And so I made sure that I took them some packets of information about the Brown v. Board case, and so they really loved that, a little gift from Kansas. Oh, one of the celebrities that has been really instrumental and really kind of changed my thoughts was Nick Cannon. He was one of the ones that actually, so our commission, just a little, we are charged with doing all of this work, and there was no appropriations that was set aside to be able to do that work. And so that's been quite an interesting challenge in itself. Well, Nick Cannon was one of the first celebrities to step forward and make a sizable contribution. And I'm telling you, this young man, if you don't know who he is, he used to be married to Mariah Carey, and he does a lot of things on the television movies, and he's kind of a comedian. But I had no idea that he was so smart. And I mean, we sat down and had a chance to really visit with him about his desire for our next generation, and that moved us forward to launching our new initiative that I'm going to share a little bit about in just a minute. Also in June, we talked about it coincide with the National Juneteenth celebration, and to promote the International Day of Drumming and Healing, which was events that we had about 35 events across the United States and internationally. So it was really, really good. So there we are at our big moment in August. So on August the 22nd through the 25th, the 400 Years of African American History Commission conducted one of our official meetings and participated in the development of programs and activities in Hampton, Virginia at Fort Monroe, which commemorated the 400th anniversary of the arrival of Africans in the English colonies at Point Comfort, Virginia. I thought that I've done a few things, you know, like the birth of my children, attended that, my grandchildren, and I was at the inauguration of President Obama, but I will have to say, this event probably was just like right up there. It's one of those life events that just changes you for the better. To see the sea of faces and individuals from all different vantage points, racial backgrounds, religious organizations, and individuals all coming together to commemorate this this event. And we did a release of doves and butterflies. And there, Commissioner Terry E. Brown, National Park Service Superintendent at Fort Monroe, he played the lead role in coordinating an array of activities with key officials and international guests and thousands from around the country. Just a little side note, Commissioner Terry Brown actually came to Topeka and visited us during the Brown versus the Board of Education 65th anniversary. And there's a little picture of him at the site, and you can see Superintendent Sherida there too, hanging out. It's pretty good. Our latest commemoration effort came really close to home, and I just got a chance to participate in that just this week. We had two schools in the Kansas City Public School District, African Center Prep and Hartman Elementary, were recently selected to be among 400 schools in the nation to serve as international ambassadors for the 400 Schools initiative. This is a initiative that we are doing in conjunction with the National Park Service. There I got a chance, there's one of our scholars that's involved in this initiative. As part of being an international ambassador, their responsibilities, each school will select a theme to focus on during the special activities. They will have trips and presentations throughout the academic year, and their themes are designed to spark community conversations about history and culture and the future of African Americans. The theme at the Afro-Centered Prep will be Breaking Barriers. This will include discussions about African American pioneers like Branch Bruce, who was the first African American to serve a full term in the U.S. Senate, and then Ida B. Wells, who is my hero. She was one of the original founders of the NAACP. Mary Church Terrell, an activist in the suffrage movement, which is very timely as we get ready to commemorate the centennial of women getting the right to vote. And then the students at Hartman Elementary Schools, they chose the theme, Standing Up to Keep a Seat. They will focus on African Americans who fought for decades to gain access to equal education. And they will include having students correspond with civil rights activists. They will study about Ruby Bridges, and then they'll be coming on a field trip to Topeka, Kansas to study about Brown versus the Board of Education. We launched this, and it's not just high schools, junior high schools and high schools. There's also universities that are involved in this initiative as well. There's a little bit about our plans, and then what you can do. And with that, I'd like to kind of end and open it up if I have a few minutes for questions or anything that maybe you would have related to the commission or the Kansas African American Affairs Commission.
Seems like you got a late start on the 400 years. So how long is this going to continue?
So we're actually, by the law, we should sunset in July of 2020. But there is right now, before Congress, we asked for an extension because of the fact that we were late being placed. And then we didn't, because we should have actually been appointed and in position by June of 2018. We didn't have our first meeting until November, and then immediately, like I said, it was the shutdown, so we really didn't get started until a good move until February. Yes?
Seems like a fantastic topic for a Ken Burns documentary. Has anybody talked to him about it? This would be I bet he'd make something really nice out of that.
I don't know if anyone has spoken with him directly, but I put some material on the tables that you all could take a look at. I'm asking you not to take it because it actually for my commissioners, but I wanted to share with you. And one of the things, the New York Times did a fabulous article about 1619. There's some videos online and a lot of discussions. It is really phenomenal. And so I'm sure that there'll be some things documenting this effort as well.
Do you know if that Brown versus Board historic site is doing anything specific?
Well, we've been partnering almost from the beginning with Brown v. Board National Park Sites because our commission falls up under the National Park Service. It is just a natural relationship that we have. And so it just all kind of worked together with really getting the opportunity to know Sherida. And I'm really in hopes that, especially with the schools here in Kansas, that we can really make it a very engaging relationship related to the promotion of the history. But to circle back with you, during the 65th, that was a lot of the discussion. And there's another thing that I don't know if you're aware of, but we're actually working with the National Trust right now, Sheridan, the City of Topeka, and some community organizations to figure out a way that we could remove the silos and better create an alliance between the 4 states and Washington, D.C. to be able to tell the story of Brown versus Board of Education, seeing how legal scholars agree that it is in the top 5 of legal decisions that changed the face of our nation, and it's studied not only nationally, but internationally. Well, yes.
Where the Topeka USD 501 school district has knowledge or interest in this project?
I actually put together packets, and I've been getting them out. Our executive director, Ms. Addie Richburg, is actually in the Midwest for that launch that took place on Monday and Tuesday, and she's all over St. Louis right now. There's several schools in Missouri, school district that's participating, and it's my hope that Kansas will follow suit. It's just, you know, it just makes good sense. We, in the Midwest, we really have been the trailblazers and the game changers when it comes to African American history in this nation, from the Civil War through the Civil Rights Movement. So I really would love to see our kids be more involved, because it really gives them a sense of self and helps them to understand the contributions that all of our ancestors played in making America the great country that it is today. I will say that it has been truly an honor to serve on this commission. I am serving with some very renowned individuals, and the commission covers the spectrums of, we have scholars, we have the faith community, artists, community activists, educators. We really have tried to cultivate a well-rounded cross-section of individuals to make sure that we are promoting and sharing this history, and we believe that it will help to facilitate a lot of the national conversations toward reconciliation and healing in our nation. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I must admit, as a youth, I didn't have a lot of interest in history, and I realize now that it's so very important, to the point where I've gotten involved in the Friends of the Free State Capitol, courtesy of Grant, who's done a lot of heavy lifting on the restoration. Chris Meinhardt, Doug Wallace is on the board, David Beck's on the board, so our Rotary Club is very much involved in that project. A couple of announcements. Well, first of all, let me mention, it is our tradition to donate a book to Ross Elementary School, and we'll ask you to sign the inside cover, and we'll donate it in your honor of this presentation. We will be here at the Capitol Plaza in this room, Shawnee Room, through March. With the exception, yes, with the exception of a few meetings, we'll have socials in lieu of meetings, and you'll get those announcements. But I believe we'll be in this room. Now, please look at your emails, because every once in a while they will bump us to a different room. So we are saying Manor Conference Room or Manor Room right now, but that possibly could change. A couple of calendar items. Let me first mention history trivia. On this day in 1916, Woodrow Wilson was reelected as president. And then also in 1960 on this day, Jeanette Rankin from Montana was the first congresswoman elected. Now, I mentioned the trivia because I want to lead into a save the date. So get your calendar apps out. On February 13th, our Rotary Club, in conjunction with Southwest and to some extent the North Club, will be having a trivia night. It will take place at the Civic Theater More details to follow, but we're going to form teams. It's going to be a very fun evening with prizes and surprises and so forth. So please get that on your calendar. A couple of other calendar items, and these are about 90% sure, according to Cody, but on Tuesday the 19th, we'll be doing Covered in Coats at Pine Ridge Prep. That's at 1 o'clock. On Wednesday the 20th, same thing at 1 o'clock, but it'll be at Quincy Elementary. On Monday the 25th, 1 o'clock, Williams Magnet. There will be subsequent announcements if anything changes, but if you want to put those on your calendars, please do. Pardon me?
Is that November?
Yes. Are those dates not lining up on the calendar?
And the 25th is Wednesday, right? I thought you said Monday.
I didn't even open up my calendar.
Maybe I'm on the wrong year.
2019, Kathleen. Okay. One other thing to mention, if you're wanting to, of course, we announced last week Andy Chandler has passed away, and he's, of course, a longtime member of our club, extremely generous in our community. The visitation will be from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock this coming Saturday at the First Presbyterian Church, which is at 817 Southwest Harrison, and then the celebration of life will follow at 3 o'clock. Let's see, I think, okay, next week, very important meeting. We will be doing the election of officers. We want our attendance to be as high as possible. Of course, we want to have a quorum there. Mark had mentioned the slate of officers. We'll have paper ballots. We'll do that. Joni will be back in town. By the way, Joni is at a Rotary function at the United Nations in New York. So she's not playing hooky. It's Rotary business, so it's very cool that she's there. There will be a special presentation. We're giving serious thought of maybe some fairly significant changes in our membership categories and so forth. And we want to inform you about that because it will make a difference going forward if all these changes are implemented. So we ask that you be there to take part in that presentation. And please encourage other members who maybe are not here all the time to make it to that meeting. And I think that covers my announcements, and let's conclude with the 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And will it be fun?